On the dark night of August 8th, 1963, a Royal Mail train was traveling from Glasgow to London. In one of its compartments, there were bags filled with cash, totaling roughly £67 million in today's value, or about 800 crore rupees. The train driver, Jack Mills, was speeding the engine through the darkness of the night. Suddenly, a red signal flashed at a crossing. For the driver, this was completely abnormal, because a red signal at this specific time and place made no sense. Nevertheless, driver Jack Mills hit the brakes immediately, bringing the train to a halt on the desolate track. For a moment, silence fell everywhere, but hidden behind this silence was a master plan to execute the robbery of the century, the Great Train Robbery, where the train itself was stolen. Welcome back to another video on Control Narrative. Viewers, this might sound like the script of a movie, but in real life, bandits planned a suspense-filled heist and looted millions of pounds from a British government train. And they did it without firing a single bullet. It all started months earlier, when some of London's most notorious criminals put their heads together for a new exploit. Bruce Reynolds, the mastermind of this plan, began plotting a unique heist with his associates. He possessed secret information about Britain's national postal service, the Royal Mail. This secret intel came from a senior security officer within Royal Mail itself, a man whose name remains a mystery to this day. The information was this: the train going from Glasgow to London carries a special carriage known as the High Value Packages, or HVP. On a specific day, a massive amount of money was going to be transported in it, and that was the carriage they had to loot. Bruce Reynolds and his partners were known criminals, but they had no experience robbing trains. So, they brought in another London gang for this plan who did have that experience. This infamous gang was known as the South Coast Raiders. Slowly, the team grew, and soon more than 15 people were involved in the plot. They decided they would rob the government train without firing a shot. But this was no ordinary robbery where you simply stop the train and loot it. This required months of planning. On August 7th, 1963, at 6:50 p.m., the train departed from Glasgow Central Station for London. It was scheduled to reach London's Euston Railway Station at 4 a.m. the next day. The train had a total of 12 carriages, and 72 post office staff members were on board to sort the mail during the journey. This train was run specifically to drop parcels and post to different cities. Therefore, it had to drop parcels at various stations without even stopping. Whenever a station approached, the local post office staff would hang mail bags on special elevated racks. As the train passed the platform, it would slow down, and the staff inside would use a net to catch those bags. Similarly, the bags they needed to drop at that station were tossed onto the platform while the train was still moving. Through this process, mail was distributed to different stations without the train ever coming to a halt. The carriage that was to be robbed wasn't even attached to the train yet. That carriage was parked safely at the depot. This carriage was called the HVP, High Value Packages, because it mostly contained large amounts of cash that people were money ordering to other cities at the time. In 1960, 3 years prior to this event, the Post Office Investigation Branch had ordered the installation of security alarm systems in HVP carriages to increase safety. By 1961, 3 HVP carriages were fitted with these alarms. The old carriages, which didn't have alarms, were kept in reserve. But the day of the robbery was the most critical. On that specific day, all the HVP carriages with security alarms were out of service. Therefore, a reserve carriage M3024M had to be used, which had no security system at all. This was a massive tip that the robbers received from the Royal Mail insider. When the train from Glasgow reached the station, the railway staff connected the HVP carriage directly behind the engine. This was the first tip the robbers received. But the second tip was even more important. Normally, HVP carriages carried around 300,000 pounds. But because the previous week had been a bank holiday weekend, on the day of the robbery, it was carrying nearly 3 million pounds. And that was tip number 2. The coincidence that happened that day happens perhaps once in years. 12 times more money was on board, and by chance, the alarm-equipped carriage was broken. But for the robbers, This was no coincidence. They had been planning for this exact day for months. Anyway, the train, along with the HVP carriage, departed. It was night, and 8-year-old driver Jack Mills was speeding the train toward its destination. Meanwhile, the gang of robbers was lying in wait in the bushes near the railway track. Their planning was absolute perfection. On August 8th, 1963, around 3 a.m., a member of the robbers group began tampering with the signal at Sears Crossing. He jammed a glove over the green light to hide it, and used a battery to illuminate the red light. Then, they all hid and waited for the train. When the train reached Sears Crossing, the driver was quite surprised to see the red light, because normally, trains, especially Royal Mail trains, are never stopped at this crossing. Nevertheless, Jack Mills applied the brakes and stopped the train exactly at the signal. Suddenly, a silence fell over everything. The assistant driver, also known as the second man, got down from the train to contact the signalman using the line-side telephone. When he picked up the phone at the signal, he realized the line had been cut, which was part of the robbers' plan. Just as the second man turned to head back to the engine, bandits emerged from the bushes and overpowered him. Some robbers climbed up both sides of the engine and tried to overpower the driver as well. When Jack Mills resisted, a robber struck him on the head with an iron rod, knocking him unconscious right in the driving seat. The robbers had come fully prepared. While this chaos was happening in the engine, other team members uncoupled the first two carriages from the rest of the train. Their plan was to drive the train away from there. But to where? About 1 kilometer away from Sears Crossing was Bridego Bridge, and that is where the robbers' truck was waiting. They had brought a retired railway driver with them, whose job was to drive the train to Bridego Bridge. Until this point, everything had gone exactly according to plan. But now, the robbers faced their first problem. The driver they brought along panicked just looking at the controls of this new engine because he had never operated this type before. Desperate, the robbers tried to revive Jack Mills and forced him to drive the train 1 kilometer down the track. The engine and the two carriages began moving again, and they stopped it 1 kilometer away at Bridego Bridge. Meanwhile, the staff and the rest of the train carriages left behind had no idea why the train had stopped. Upon reaching Bridego Bridge, the robbers broke the door of the HVP carriage. They stormed in, inflicted injuries on the 5 staff members, tied them up, and made them lie face down. Then, they began their operation. Inside the HVP carriage, there were a total of 128 bags stuffed with cash. These were £1, £5, and 10-shilling notes. The total weight was nearly 2.5 tons. The train was on the bridge, and a truck was parked on the road below. According to the plan, they only had 15 minutes. So, they formed a human chain. And one by one, they loaded 120 of the 128 bags into the truck. The remaining 8 bags were left behind due to lack of time. Their plan had worked perfectly. However, they made just one mistake at the very end, which proved to be the most useful clue for catching them. Before leaving, a robber told the tied-up staff, "Don't even try to move from here for 30 minutes, or you'll lose your lives." The robbers had an Austin Lodestar truck, loaded with all the cash, and 2 Land Rovers which bore the same license plate, BMG 757, to confuse witnesses. After the heist, they all fled the scene. After a drive of about 45 minutes, at 4:30 a.m., they reached their hideout, which was Leatherslade Farm, near a village called Oakley, about 43 kilometers from the crime scene. During this time, they were listening to police chatter on VHF radio, which helped them greatly. Just as they reached their hideout, the police learned of the robbery. But for the moment, the robbers were overjoyed. They celebrated at the hideout. They even played the Monopoly game, using real notes. But their happiness was short-lived. A short while later, they heard on the radio that the police were searching for them within a 50-kilometer radius. The police deduced this 50-kilometer radius because of the statement from the staff member who was told not to move for 30 minutes. The police realized that, in 30 minutes, the robbers could only be within a 50-kilometer circle. Hearing this, the robbers panicked. Their plan to leave the hideout on Sunday was shifted to Friday. On Thursday, they divided all the money among themselves. The stolen amount was nearly £2.5 million. According to some reports, each member received about £150,000, which was a huge amount in that era. In today's terms, each share would be worth millions. The rest of the money was distributed among the helpers who played smaller roles. Before Friday, they wiped their fingerprints off everything in the hideout. They paid a man to burn down the hideout after they left, so the police would find no evidence. He took the money, but fled without burning the farmhouse. Meanwhile, the police were searching the entire Buckinghamshire area. Helicopters were circling the city, police cars were racing everywhere, and there was a storm in the national media. The police announced a £10,000 reward for anyone providing information. Upon hearing this, a neighbor of the hideout came forward. He informed the police that there had been a lot of activity there on the morning of August 8th. Based on suspicion, the police immediately raided the hideout. It was Leatherslade Farm, which the robbers had rented 3 months prior. There, the police found piles of evidence linked to the robbery, such as empty mailbags and a truck that had been hastily painted yellow. The robbers had wiped their fingerprints, but they missed the Monopoly board, the one they had played with real money. Some fingerprints were still on it. These fingerprints proved to be the major breakthrough in the case, as all of them already had criminal records. The prints matched the records at Scotland Yard, and the real culprits were identified. Within a few days, the police arrested 14 of the 16 people. Only 2 people managed to escape the police: the replacement train driver whose real name nobody knew, and that Royal Mail senior security officer whose tip-off made the entire plan possible. To this day, nobody knows who that officer was, as he never revealed his face or his name. The court declared this the robbery of the century and sentenced almost everyone in the gang to 30 years in prison. After this robbery, Bridego Bridge became famous as Train Robbers Bridge, and to this day, that is its informal name. Jack Mills, the 58-year-old train driver, could never work again due to the head injury, and just 7 years later, he passed away from the trauma. I hope you liked this video on Control Narrative. Please like and share. Thank you so much for your lovely comments. See you in the next amazing video.